I'm going to talk about some pro tips and reminders. These are just things that I have learned in practice that I hope will be helpful for you. Um, some of them, yeah, I've read in books, and some other people have told me that I've been like, oh, yeah, that's really true. So the first question is not the real question, and that is quite often the case where someone will open with a question because they think, for some reason, whatever reason, they think that um, you can't answer their ultimate question, or it's easier to ask. I don't even know why, but they'll say, this is a typical, my friend Margaret Vegerick, who is the subject librarian for history and political science and the honors college at Texas State University, has allowed me to use this anecdote from her time on the desk. At one time a woman came in with a small child on a Saturday and asked, her initial question was, do you have any books on flowers? And Margaret starts in on the books and starts showing her different books, and then asks, well, was there anything in particular that you want to know about flowers? And eventually the woman said, well, really need something to say which flowers are poisonous. And Margaret was like, oh, I see, and said, well, let me get you some information. And then the woman said, because my child has just eaten this particular flower, and I don't know what it is. So Margaret realized that her ultimate need was poison control information, and so she pulled out the poison control information and had the woman call. And I think she did have the plant with her, so was able to identify it. But Margaret tells it as a funny story, but it's really quite terrifying and unusual, because it's not every day that that's going to happen. But it's a really good example of how people will kind of give you the question that they think they should be asking. They don't want to burden you with their information need, which seems strange, but I think that's public nature. And it even happens in the context of with attorneys or faculty. Sometimes they are being polite, so they'll ask sort of either a broader question than their actual need. The patron may not be aware of the resources available and what information is in the resources. This is really, really true. And a lot of times they'll preface the question with, I don't even know if this is possible. And a lot of times it is, it's like, oh yeah, we have a table on that, or it's in this book, there's a table. And these can be very sophisticated, specialist people who just don't happen to know much about information resources. I've had attorneys who were, in their 7th year, I'm basically about to make partner, and did make partner. A guy really, really, seemed to have everything on the ball, was doing really well. He comes into the library and he says, and you could tell he was embarrassed. He was like, I don't know where the federal law books are. And it's because he had always used Westlaw or the free, the internet sources for he didn't know what the books look like, because he just, he had never used the United States Code annotated, right, which is the set of books. And so he just wasn't used to it. And so we have to sort of push back against being elitist in our own librarian way. I've seen librarians do it where it's their one thing they can hold above attorneys or faculty, is this sort of arcane knowledge of resources. We really shouldn't do that. We really should be as helpful as we can and realize how difficult it is to know all of this information. We shouldn't expect lay people to know this information, and we should try to help them match with the resource that they need. That's kind of our job, which is really the entire point of this course, is just to get you familiarity with these sources and an understanding of how to use them. And I have one more anecdote about that. When I first told, I was working at Haynes and Moon Law Firm when I got this job, and I mentioned to a partner who I'd done a lot of work for, I was very friendly with, and we were going down an elevator, and I told her what I would be doing, and she said, "Oh, well, that's good. At least you won't have to show them how to use the resources," which is exactly what I need to show. I think she was coming from a library point of view and not a legal research. She knew it was a library class, legal information resources, but they're absolutely no use to us if we just haven't learned what they are and the list of them. Really, as librarians, we have to know how to use them. And I think she had that sense of, from being an attorney, is that they know more about how to use the resources than anyone, which is sort of the fallacy that I had coming into this, is that I thought I knew more than a librarian would know, which is, I've learned, is not true. So that's just something you'll come up again. You do have to know how to use them, and you actually have to know a lot about the law in order to do legal research, which is, it's a backwards kind of thing. You can't assume lawyers know where the law is or even what the law is, and it's very difficult to have to school them on the issues, but sometimes you do. And the only advice I have is just to be as clear and upfront and as non-judgmental as possible. Explaining processes is not legal advice, and this will come up next week when we talk about the unauthorized practice of law. As librarians, and even as law librarians or librarians with law degrees, we can't practice law. So in helping patrons, we are supposed to be helping them find something, but we can't actually practice law. So we'll be talking about what does that mean. And I'll let you know up front, explaining processes and how things work isn't practicing law. So we can go a long way in showing people how to use books, explaining legal processes. I'll explain, how a bill becomes a law, how a case proceeds through the process, even how a patent is prosecuted, things like that. There are processes. There's a lot of processes involved in the law, and us explaining them to people isn't practicing law. It's good to know, and it's not legal advice. Does the patron want training? So sometimes people come in and they really do just want to learn how to use something. So they just want to learn how to use Westlaw. They don't want you to do the search for them. They actually want to know how to do it. And so sometimes it's, even though they're asking the questions, they're not saying straight out, I want to do it. And sometimes you have to be open and say, would you like to learn how to use it, or would you like me to just give you the results? And sometimes they really do just want the results. They don't want to be trained. And this is a big problem where I work now in the academic setting, that the librarians tend to want to teach faculty and students how to do things, how to use databases, how to fish themselves. That's just, I don't know, it's like something that people want to do, and they don't think it's their job to actually do the research or find the information, and so, or put the citation together, and which that's great, but sometimes you're not working in a context in which that's actually what people want you to do, and it becomes difficult because sometimes you end up doing a lot of things that aren't really in your job description. But that's a conversation you have to have with your supervisor about sort of the scope of your job and, whether or not you should be doing somebody's work for them. And this will come up when we do the reference questions, because sometimes it will become apparent that someone's just giving you their work to do, and you really shouldn't be doing their work. But sometimes it's hard to extricate yourself from it once you've jumped in. Don't assume you know what they mean. This has really burned me really badly. I always sort of think I'm psychic about things and I can kind of read people's minds and I know what they're getting at. And you do, after a while, get to where people pose a question in a certain way and you're like, I bet they want the, the form books. I bet they want to know about this particular law because it's trending right now. And you make these assumptions, or you assume that I got burned really bad and I assumed something was just a bad citation and that it was a different book. And no, it turns out it was this really rare, obscure book, and I totally went down the wrong path. And I was just so sure of myself. So you really have to maintain your humility because otherwise you will be humbled. It will happen. So don't be so sure, which is odd because, librarians usually were very like not sure. I think we tend to be that way. It's just our personalities. And I think you have to hold on to that in a way because information is just so fluid and people's needs are just so fluid. Listen like a thief. This comes from my improv training that when you do improv, it's from Jill Bernard. She works out of Minneapolis and she's written a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but one of the things that I've learned from her is when you're doing improv, you listen like a thief. So you listen as if you're going to take their information and use it against them and steal their stuff in their house. They just listen intently and pay attention, and that is really true. You don't have to take down notes, you don't have to, but listen to try to figure out what they are doing, and that means sort of being aware. Now in the land of Zoom, we can actually look at people and see their body language. Just get as much information as you can and be open to it. What is issue spotting? So issue spotting is what you do, and it's something you learn in law school, and it's something that lawyers do. But that is looking at a set of facts and being able to tell you what the legal issues are involved and what the problems are. And I think that that is actually a skill that attorneys are supposed to have, but I've found over the years that librarians and library students are actually very good at it, possibly better than attorneys. And so know that if you have the mind that likes to do this sort of thing, that you are probably very good at it. And use that to your advantage. Take advantage of that information, offer it where you can, and use it to get rid of sort of, what's the word, discriminate between different ideas. So you may say, oh, is this a criminal problem? Maybe there's two different issues, and then you can ask about both of them. And they may say, oh no, I'm not interested in the criminal part of it. I'm just interested in this part. And it will help you kind of gauge and narrow down their actual question. Never argue. It is useless and it will totally drain you. I have seen librarians do it. It's just accept whatever comes, and if someone is wrong, just accept that they're wrong. And it's really come in handy with me. I don't police copyright, so if someone tells me they're doing something, if they don't present in a way that they're asking me for permission or to validate them, I'm not going to mention it. If someone says, I did this and I need something and they're asking me about something else, I'm not going to go over and give them a critique of this other thing unless I feel very comfortable with them, especially if they have already indicated that they think that they're right. I'm not going to go there. That said, sometimes you actually have to go back and say, hey, I can't be silent on this because it's actually, if me being silent is going to condone something. And that's a really difficult thing to know. What's the difference? I mean, I just say choose your battles, let the little stuff go, and only save your energy for the really important things. And everybody has different things, um, and just go with your conscience is what I say. Um, Public service is customer service, and you probably already know this, especially if you've worked. It's very much like retail. To me, most of my career, I tell you what it mostly felt like and still feels like is being a waitress and serving up people dishes. And, if that's demeaning to you, you may have issues because that's a lot. You're really like a server of information. So take that for what it is worth. Ask for time to research the question, get back to them. I mentioned this before. It's a really freeing tip, and you'll need it. You'll need that time. And sometimes you need the space that gives you. So this is a long one. I may have to break it up into two pieces because these two slides took a lot of time. So on to the next thing.